Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you to another really amazing page of the Lime Green Journal. A brief information about this venture. The Lime Green Journal tells stories of creative journeys, cultural and conceptual exchange, and artistic cross fertilization, where we converse and explore the fascinating minds of creative people. We hope to inspire curiosity, ignite your imagination, and provoke new ways of thinking about the world. For this feature, our guest is Faraz Ali, who is a UAE-based award-winning interdisciplinary designer and a performing artist. Over the past decade, Ali has been studying Urdu literature as both a creative tradition and a socio-cultural phenomena. And to this end, he has engaged in both deep study and experimentation. Ali has collaborated at both local and international levels to foster critical understanding and practice of literature and theatre in particular. In the UAE, Ali has performed at various institutions and initiatives, including Art Jameel, AlSerkal Avenue, Emirates Airline Literature Festival, and Pakistan Association, Dubai. In 2018, he delivered a performative lecture on the works of the modernist Urdu poet N.M. Rashid at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge. He has directed a bilingual performance ensemble titled The Pursuit of Expression in collaboration with the art writer Kevin Jones. Alongside direction, he also wrote a theatrical play titled Ganje Shakar, which was performed at Art Jameel, SEMA Performing Arts Studio at AlSerkal Avenue in 2019. On the digital front, Ali has developed two projects. One is Zair Zabar Pesh, an ongoing digital platform where he curates a variety of artistic and literary subjects. And the other project, titled as Project Adab, is a collection of 15 masterpieces of Urdu poetry which have been experimentally rendered for a digital interface. Faraz, thank you so much for gracing us with your time and space and for all your wonderful contributions.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you for including me in this very interesting lineup of people that you have been curating. And yeah, it sounds really exciting.
It's been a project of a lifetime for me, because speaking with people who I look up to, who I constantly seek inspiration from, they've actually agreed to be a part of this, and it's super humbling, and I'm so grateful. Thank you very much. So I'd like to dive into the first curiosity. I have a very curious question. So you integrate different genres of art, theater, literature, music, performance, art, all of these things together. And it sure does make the entire creative process very heavy in terms of its substance, right? And it's very immersive. It's supremely immersive when you look at it,
Yeah.
when we watch you perform, when we listen to your oration, when we see your beautiful visuals that you put up in Zair Zabar Pesh and other projects. They are highly immersive and they do connect because they're so genuine. So, in all of this, in this entire creative process, what are the feelings that guide your process, that direct you, that make you work towards a project, or construct something where you are able to convey your ideas?
I think there's I can say, like, curiosity. Sabse pehle, I think that's one of the things that actually really drives me, but also opportunity to learn. Everything that I do, there's the most meaningful part of my experience is becoming aware of what I don't know, and how much I don't know. So I think it's always very humbling, but at the same time, I think so. The feeling is I can say it's like curiosity, but at the same time, curiosity to realize how much I don't know.
And it's something that sort of keeps you grounded. It makes you feel the gravity, right? I was just saying that, this curiosity and just the fact of knowing that you don't know anything. I'm sure everyone has actually seen that photograph that has been very viral on Facebook at one point, where there's this photograph of a universe and then there's a little tiny speck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they say that that is you. That's how small you are.
Exactly.
And there's a universe of knowledge and information that you don't know. So that is a very humbling thing.
Exactly.
That makes you actually feel gravity beneath your feet, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we have perspective ki baat hai. There's like a very interesting anecdote. Someone actually shared with me, which actually helped me a lot. It's the story of this guy who basically like was astronaut, and he's leaving the US, and when his flight जो है उसकी ऊपर जा रही, तो he is like, oh, I belong from the city. फिर उसके बाद जब वो ऊपर जाती, he's like, oh, I belong from the state. फिर उसके बाद और जब ऊपर elevate होती है, then the guy is like, oh, I belong from the US. And then further it goes, he's like, oh, I'm from this continent. But then suddenly, like, when he goes further, he just realizes that, okay, I belong from this world. So it's about perspective. And I think that has been a very important aspect of my work as well, because it has made me aware in many ways, and also like made me aware of my uninformed biases and misguided desires in the process of making sense of the world around me.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your creative process. So when you are working on something, uh, not for someone else, not a project which has other collaborations, but solely something that is your work, something that is connected with your innate self, right? So what is that creative process like? Do you like to keep it very solitary? Do you like being private about it? Do you like isolating yourself and then releasing all the energies, or do you like having collaborations? Do you like having individuals around you? What is it like?
So actually, actually both. Like there is a part when I'm trying to get comfortable with the material that I'm trying to work with, I need to spend a lot of time doing research. Again, my background is in design, so it actually allows me to unveil and look at something from many places. So like, for example, literature, like, I always talk about there's a poetic reading, and then there's an external reading, which can be ideological reading, which can be like philosophical reading, or many readings are possible for anything that you're actually looking at, whatever is your object. So I try to actually start off with looking at the internal work that took place that I'm actually trying to figure out. And once I have that comfort and I'm aware what's the subject, what are the nuances, how it has been detailed, and I'm able to gather as much information as I can, then I try to go through this whole process. So let's say if I were to give you an example of if I have to perform a poem, right? So poetry has a lot of like aspects. You need to know what it is in terms of its form, but then at the same time, there's this whole melody, which is the whole aspect of poetry, which is so critical to its nature. So to get familiar with that, I have my own process. So my process is to go out on a walk, right? And the rhythm of the body and the rhythm of the movement, that allows me to actually also make sense of what the rhythm in the poem. So that's how I memorize poems. For me, the first step is to memorize that poem, to get in close proximity to the work that I'm actually addressing, or my subject. And once I have memorized it, then I have here, and then I have all the luxury to think about it. And then I go out and I start interacting with different types of people. So like, for example, over the years, I have identified few people who I think are my audience. And I really think that people are really smart. We actually think that, oh, people might not understand, to appreciate it, kind of figure it out, that if I'm going to perform it for an audience, before that, I need to interact with people and individuals who are slightly different from each other, to understand that how I can refine my performance, because it's not just about creating an expression. There's so much that one expression can carry. And I have to make sure as a designer, because I'm also looking at it from a point of view of problem solving. So if I have to transfer something and I have to communicate something complicated, the design process helps me to actually make those expressions. So there's a solitary phase of my creative process, but then I just don't put it out there. I have to kind of iterate my methodology and the way I work, and refine it in that process as before I put it out there.
And so what about the material? How do you archive your notes? Do you have a lot of post-its on the wall? Do you carry journals with you, or do you write stuff on your phone? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Let me show you something. So these are my notebooks. Can you see it?
Yes.
You can't do it. So like basically these are these tiny notebooks that I actually have. I always have them. People who know me, they always know, okay, you know, this is Faraz's book. And I have like around like 90
Wow.
that I have collected.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So Ismail, like, and what I'm trying to do is like whatever thoughts, feelings, ideas that I have, I'm always documenting them. A lot of the times I'm actually just drawing, right? So like, and it really helps because when you switch between, you know, a textual form of art, let's say literature and visual art, I think they complement each other in terms of semantics, and it really helps. So like the other day, I was actually like, I was reading somewhere that eyes are always drawn as a banana boat because and because there's this whole concept in mythology and mysticism that eyes are like these boats which are traveling in the
Mm-hmm.
ocean of manifestation. So I had to draw it. I had to draw that eye, and I had to draw that boat to be able to comprehend what is being said. And then that thought stayed with me for a really long time. So the process of documentation and journaling ideas, they're really they're a major part of my work.
So how do you decide?
So yeah, so my notebook,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, it's like
Those are your assets. Wow, that's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. So what was your question? Sorry.
I was just wondering because this infinite amount of ideas and knowledge that you contain within that book, right? Within those, I think, a dozen of books or more than that. How do you decide whether your idea or your thought is good enough to be launched into a project or to show it to the world? Do you feel that, does it come to you intuitively? Is it based on your research? Is it based on, like, as you mentioned, curiosity, right?
Yeah.
But then again, is there any restlessness that also charges you? How do you decide that it's
Oh,
good enough?
it's a constant restlessness. I So for me, what happens is like depends on the opportunity. A lot of the times when I'm doing my own personal writings
Mhm.
or my own personal work, I do it for myself primarily. So I always try to document it and capture it because I also know from my previous experience that somewhere down the line where I get a moment to interact with people or to present my work, all of these ideas, they actually come together. So I'm kind of mining them in my head
Mhm.
the in the process of documenting them.
Mhm.
So but there are certain ideas that actually they come with a lot of intensity,
Mhm.
but that intensity a lot of the times goes down, and I understand that this is an idea which needs work, and it might take a couple of years to actually form. So like, and actually that has happened to me a couple of times. A lot of my work, years and years and years of work goes into it because I am a very self-critical person. I like refining my idea. And then let's say if I when I was putting my first poetic work out there, it
Mhm.
had to go very long process. Like it took me 5 years to actually put it out there because again, I have a profession as a designer as well, right?
Mhm.
So I actually have I've built a name in that career. So this is something where I actually like do things completely at my will. And until I'm comfortable that I am producing something out there which adds value, I am not gonna put it out there. So there is a lot of self-critical process that goes through it. But in these books, constantly there are ideas that are being jotted because eventually I know that they're gonna come together somehow.
Mhm.
But also academically, things that I'm reading or I'm learning about, I might come across one major theme that I feel that I need to invest myself in. And then
Mhm.
that theme kind of runs along as a study for a really long time. And a lot of ideas are born within that study. So like,
Yes.
for example, last year I was studying, my theme that I was studying was Hakiki and Majazi. And it was such a vast field, but at the
Could,
same time, sorry.
could you also give the English translation of Hakiki and Mazaji?
So Hakiki is basically like what we see as something literal, and Majazi is figurative.
Okay.
And so something which is apparent, something which is hidden. And
Mhm.
so I was exploring this theme that how does it, and I had wonderful findings because when you're studying like a theme for over 1 year, on day-to-day basis, there are a lot of these thoughts. So my notebooks are like filled with like a lot of these thoughts that, come to me. So when you see my notebooks, they're extremely unorganized because there are a lot of thoughts which are like branching out all the time. So it took me 1 year, that in that process, I wrote a couple of stuff. I did two sessions for the community where I actually brought those ideas and I discussed with people. Or uske baad, when I actually discussed and I shared it with people, I came back and I refined those ideas that maybe this is such a complicated idea. As a problem solver, how can I take such a complex idea, which someone from academia is unable to communicate to normal people? How can I actually and make it accessible and digestible? So and at the end of the year, I always, in last week of December, I always write my end of year journal entry. And I try to resolve my thoughts, like my learnings of the year. And I like to write humor and satire. So a lot of these complicated ideas, I try to communicate them through humor and satire, through pop cultural references and our day-to-day life, which I think is great, which really helps me to take these ideas closer to people who really needs them.
Then how did you decide to, so basically when you launching something, when you are doing something for the public to see, right? When you're contributing in the art industry or the creative industry, how did you decide that this is a specific kind of audience that I would like to work for? For instance, literature and Urdu. In current day and age, unfortunately, a lot of people, they are disconnected with this language because of the overpowering effect of English in our culture and in our society. So what was a defining moment for you to understand or to select the audience for this particular genre of art? And how do you make it accessible? How do you make it so easy for them to understand? Because there's no complication when we go through your work. There's nothing where you feel lost. You don't feel like you don't know it. It's just like perhaps we know it, but we didn't really practice it. But here's someone who is presenting it to us, who is, it's almost like captivating one's attention. So how did you define that understanding that this is a genre and this is the audience that I have to focus on?
So it's something, as a designer, that this really helped me, because earlier, let's say in 2011, 12, 13, 14, I spent a lot of time critically looking at that. What are the issues that we face today with Urdu and its popularity? I learned about so many stigmas. I learned about academic crisis that we have. And that kind of gave me a lot of knowledge about what needs to be addressed. But at the same time, growing up, I never had secondary education in Urdu. So it's something that I actually had it as a part of my memory. I could speak well because in my house, that's the language that is being used, but it's a very particular use, and the way it is used, it's not common anymore. So it was something which was part of my memory. But the day I started acquiring and learning the language myself, my own journey actually gave me a lot of ideas that how to actually make it accessible to people, because I'm also a kind of person who is trying to find unconventional ways and means to learn.
Yes.
And even for example, when I was in BNU in Lahore, that was the best part of my experience, that I thought that each and every person around me is an institution that can actually teach me something. So I spent a lot of time with people, not just with my teachers. And I think that process was really interesting because there's so much that one can learn, right, from unconventional mediums. So when I started building up my work, I learned that the problem lies within the creative community, and the general and let's say the creative people is my audience that needs to be addressed or looked at. Because if I communicate with them and try to make them responsible for certain things, also inform them about certain things that they might not have learned in the broken tradition that I think we lost like, growing up, or to provide and have communication and dialogue with them. And if they can actually uplift the standards of their work, let's say for specific, in particular, writers, I really think that that can trickle and that can go further. So my project Zer Zabar Pesh, it's something is not actually directed towards everyone. It's actually directed towards the creative community of Global South. And English being actually a language which has become language which most of the people are familiar with, and also it's more accessible, right?
Yes.
So it's the language of the internet. It's language of, for example, if someone growing up in Pakistan, they learn nine subjects in English and only one in Urdu. So naturally, their command over and understanding and level of comprehension in English is higher. So, and also I fight and I try to kind of discourage the biases as well, because there's so much this versus this and this versus that. I'm more of a problem solutions guy, and I try to use English to actually help people understand complicated ideas. And I'm not also someone who's actually saying that, oh, Urdu is better, English is less better. I think that's a kind of awareness that we all need to have, that we all belong from the human tradition. When you are from a certain part of the world, you actually you are familiar with certain ideas and certain things, but that doesn't make you better than others. And so I'm also I have to use internet very carefully. And that's also part of my learning, that what, as a creative, am I able to take that responsibility, and what am I putting there? And the more I have, and I choose unconventional ways and unconventional mediums and unexpected places and unexpected paths and unexpected territories to free myself from these confinements that we have created in a society, that this is fine arts, this is for very specific people, this isn't something which is not for everyday people, this is music. So I try to, so I have people who know me, they know me as someone who's extremely non-conformist, and I try to break that. So and that's something that I'm kind of working towards, and that's an important part of my work. And that is why recently, when you see that most of the public events that I'm doing, they're in parks, because parks accept everyone. And I've felt that when I'm working with an institution, it's not accessible to everyone. And I think that's extremely unfair. So that is one front that I'm trying to work in as well, and see what can be done better over there.
So there's a lot of emotions, and the intention, basically what we understand through your work, is to foster a community, to bring people together on public spaces, claiming those spaces, using them to understand the basic intention or the meaning of having a communal space where you were sharing and imparting your knowledge. So that's a big responsibility. That's sort of a lifelong project, I would say. And it's a never-ending process. So tell me, how do you describe the core concern of your creative work, where you have a larger audience, where you have people from different backgrounds, they have different understanding about the world, they have different perception about the ideas. So what are the core concerns that covers all of these aspects?
So big concern is, I think, critical thinking. I really think that education has been classified. Growing up, when I was doing A-levels, that was the idea. You decide when you're 16 years old, you decide you want to do sciences, and you don't need to do anything else. And I completely dislike that idea, that why do you have to specialize when you're 16, and why someone is actually barring me from all the other forms of knowledge. And that was a big problem. And at the same time, and I think that's why people are stuck in very particular disciplines, and they actually have no worldview in general. The worldview is very weak, and that's why when the worldview is weak, I feel like then people are unable to contribute in their society, in their politics. I remember when I was studying, that was one of the key concerns, that there will be grown-up people, 20 people in their early 20s, and they have no clue that they have a political role in their society. So there's so much lack of critical thinking and that we actually like are exposed to, because it's all about being competitive and less about learning. And so that is one of the core concerns of my work, that I sit with people and I need to inform them that you need to break from the brick that you have in your head. And that brick is so dangerous in our society that we are like we are stuck with this whole process of oversimplifying things. And what I do is I try to take people, let's say, who have nothing to do with arts, and I actually try to throw them in the flux of imagination and creativity and help them identify that we have capabilities, we have sensibilities, we have sensitivities towards things that we have actually thrown out of our own confinement, and we don't open up to. So that is a very tricky task, but that's something that I like to do, and that's something that I learned through, let's say, ghazal tradition, which was all about that, like it is an idea, it is abstract, it can actually have one verse can have so many interpretations.
Yes.
So what I do is I bring people together and I make them go through this experience. I create these prompts, and through that prompts, I create a discussion. I generally know the answers, but what I try to do is that I try to evoke people, bring them together, make them go through a very critical process, which allows them to unlearn and break free from the chains that they have actually that they are actually. It's just all self-imposed, and it's beautiful because throughout my journey of last 10 years, I got a lot of blessings. I got a lot of love from people and a lot of duas and a lot of prayers from people, just because it's something, this kind of view doesn't, it exists, but it exists in like, once in a while you come across people who actually like are able to do something like this. So I think we need to become kind, and the only way that we can actually become kind when we are able to imagine other, and we actually are unable to use our imagination. And I feel the weakness of imagination is actually like making us completely important and creatively, and at the same time making us less and less tolerant over time.
So a very important thing that you just mentioned is how to encourage people to unlearn what they know. I think that is, along with the critical thinking, there's also one issue that I feel in the creative industry, or the people who are not from the creative industry, but they're interested in it, or they're interacting with the creative industry or creative people, is that they feel or they think that the knowledge that they have is superior and they know everything, and the learning that they've had is somehow it is sufficient for them. It's something that is going to make them understand about other person's point of view. But it's really important to encourage people to unlearn what they know. Sometimes, even if it's in a gathering, if it's a curated gathering where someone is performing, your views, they completely change. They change the way you think about life altogether. So in this entire process, in our creativity, we are constantly learning, unlearning, and relearning things, right? And I'm sure you're also doing that. When you come towards literature, you might know, you might agree that you feel like, oh, I know what this verse means, but then you read another rendition of it, or you listen to some other performance, you unlearn your previous understanding, and that adds more magic to it, right? So, but with that pressure, not pressure, but like just to have that way of unlearning, oftentimes creative people, they go through creative blocks, right? So I'm sure you have, you must have experienced creative blocks in your life. So tell me, how did you overcome those blocks? How did you unlearn your routine or the ways to excel? Because sometimes they don't even work. So you either you disconnect, or you take a step back to analyze and absorb and to be still. So tell me about your techniques for overcoming creative blocks, and tell us how they have affected your process.
I think I experience creative blocks when I excessively and obsessively think about something. And sometimes you actually can see something from a very fixed perspective, and it can actually blind you, right? And that's something that I make it work, and actually like address creative block is to completely like disassociate yourself with that thing that you're working from, and you need to actually like kind of work on your mental health. That's something that I've actually like kind of really understood over the years, that you need, we all need harmony and we need balance in life. A lot of the times, let's say if I actually like had a creative block, I would go on a vacation. And when I am not thinking, I'm removing myself physically from a place and I'm throwing myself into another place. That place has unexpected prompts all around. And you know, like in some moment, the meaning can illuminate, or you can actually get an idea which can actually solve an entire puzzle for you. So for me, that's one thing. But at the same time, like even let's say if I'm not traveling, but if I'm working on one idea and I have a block there, then I try to do something else. And I try to like mentally hike on a very different idea and revisit and come back later. And I believe in epiphanies. I would really believe that there were certain ideas that I actually had and they just unveiled, and they just, you know, found their right time to actually make their way and into my life, and I worked on them. And most of my best work that I'm happy about are those which actually I got stuck with. And like literally a couple of years later, something happened and that really triggered me, and it allowed me to address that work again. So yeah, that's that's what I think about my
I'm
creative
glad it
blocks.
works for you, because the work that you do after having those epiphanies is amazing.
Thank
You
you.
should have more creative blocks then.
Yeah, like I think creative blocks are very important because we
Yes.
can also like as a designer, I really think assumptions for a designer, not just for a designer, for every individual are the scariest things, right? And that's something that is my criticism towards so many designers, that they actually do very little research. And
Yes.
also commercially in practice as well, the world that I actually come from, the amount of hours that I'll have to actually build to a project, I will never have enough hours to do my own research. No one is paying to do that research. That's why the quality of work and quality of design everywhere in the world is becoming homogeneous and similar. And that's why urban life is actually like becoming more and more and more and more similar, because there's no time to think. And I think it's a luxury now. And that's also one of the things that I like to do when I'm engaging with people, because it's important to make people think. And poetry really helps. It's not about becoming so affluent and so like someone who can understand high art. It's about accessing your own self. When you
Yes.
read poetry and you are discovering meaning in poetry, you are not understanding or unlocking a poet or an artist. You're actually stepping down in your own brain. There's no can actually step down into a mind of an artist. So it's interesting that it's like, you know, Zen gardens. You manage those Zen gardens, and it's something that is basically outside of your body. You get up in the morning, you make it part of your ritual, you clean it, but actually that whole process is allowing you to like organize your brain. So it's an activity that happens outside, but it's actually like affects your physiology
Inside.
inside.
Yes, true. So you've talked about the creative process and how you deal with the, nuances of that. Tell me about your studio space. So do you have it? Do you have a specific corner where you work, where you enjoy working? Have you curated your studio in a particular manner? Any color theme, any color palette that suits your thinking process? What is it like? Can you please tell us? And it's basically about just telling us the ideal, state where you perform the best. So please let us know.
So what you see in my background is basically that's my main space. I spend a lot of time here,
Hmm.
and I
There's great
actually try to
light.
keep. Thank you. It's basically like surrounded by all glass. So
Hmm.
the entire house is like a glass box. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of light coming in. That was one of the reasons for me to actually move here, because I need light. I can't function without. excessive light.
Mm-hmm.
And besides that, everything in most of the space in my house was very flexible. I don't fix things on the walls, so
Mm-hmm.
that I have that flexibility to move things around. I have this background over here. I have this beautiful carpet that I actually have, and I mostly, when I'm recording, I use this as a background.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, that's something that I actually always wanted to do. And also it's a nice carpet, so it makes a nice background. And most of my house is like gray and white. I
Yes.
like very, yeah, I'm a monochrome person. I like all white. The more white, better. Again, as a designer, we love negative spaces. So yeah, and again, it's just in rest of my house is like the books are everywhere. I like to keep certain things clean. I like to keep my space very, very clean so I can make a mess with my
Mm-hmm.
artwork, my books,
And then start
and
cleaning again.
yeah, yeah, and I start cleaning again, and my entire house is basically like I have these like all the collectible items and things that so for example, whenever I go up in the mountain for hiking, I
Mm-hmm.
actually collect like a small piece of the mountain, and then I have a thing for ceramics, so I collect like ceramics whenever I travel, and so yeah, and like and then I have books all over my
Wonderful.
uh and so mostly when I'm thinking, I like to go out and I like to walk and think.
Mm-hmm.
And also when I'm writing, I need to walk and write. So phones really help sometimes. But then I
Mm-hmm.
come back and I draft in my when my ideas are there, when I have put together ideas, I stitch them into a
Mm-hmm.
final draft in my space over the weekend, with some music, and I make a ritual that I actually go. But then there are also some places in cities. What I also try to do is, let's say if I have five, six different tabs open for different projects, I
Mm-hmm.
assign them different locations. So let's say if
Mm.
I'm if I'm working on a short story or an essay, I will assign that, oh, I'm gonna go to that cafe, and I need to work from there. And so that every time, so it's like I would go to that particular cafe again and again until that work is complete. So I assign spaces to projects, and that
Mm-hmm.
really helped me to make progress.
So has there ever been any, the spaces not being available, and so it eventually would halt your project and you'd not be able to think about or work on it? Has any situation occurred? Because it's a very,
Uh,
very interesting thing. I've never seen anyone associate work with different projects because, and now I'm thinking about it, I'd love to do
it,
that myself as well. Sometimes, being in your own studio sort of holds you back from, I don't know, perhaps the environment or the atmosphere or the energies around or just the visuals, colors, and different people walking around,
so yeah, I'm a morning person, so mostly when let's say I'm writing, I'm writing between 8 or 9 a.m., like 7 to
Oh.
9 a.m. in the morning. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say that if I'm writing like a very reflective piece, then I would actually go to the beach, chill there at the beach. I would just take my chair with me, head to the beach, sit there, and just write.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another place which is basically like a small cafe in a park. And again, even sometimes the park gets busy and I don't get a spot. So then I actually have my mat all the time. So I would just, lay down somewhere and continue to work. So yeah, until now, there haven't been many cases where like I always choose places which actually give me comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're like mostly open, natural spaces. And yeah,
Do you
for
experience
now,
do you experience chaos in your creative process? Because what I'm hearing, everything is so zen, so peaceful, so calming. Even the color palette around you, they're muted, they're desaturated, your setting, like you just pictured. I'm visualizing it in my mind. I'm a very
yeah.
visual person that way. So it's like, wow, this is so therapeutic. But in your process, do you experience
Yeah.
chaos, mental chaos,
Uh,
emotional chaos? And then how do
Chaos
you
is
deal with that?
here.
Yes. So,
Chaos is here. And I feel like it's something that I actually learned through therapy, that
uh-huh.
I need to find that balance in life. If I actually don't keep things around me clean and organized, then I will not be able to do anything with my creativity, because creativity is a very messy process. It's just, there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of things which are like, coming your way. that you have to capture.
Mm.
And I think you have to compartmentalize your life so that you can easily respond to it. Can you give me just, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I just realized I'm out of battery. Just, I need
Sure,
10.
sure. Please take your time.
Yes, I am back.
Welcome back. So let's talk about your influences. Are
Mhm.
there any certain figures, icons, subjects, movements, or people in your family, or someone within your close vicinity who have inspired you and who have influenced you to do what you're doing right now?
Okay, so in design, when I talk about, so I actually explain, I think it's a really nice description that I use to explain what I do. So I work in two streams. As a designer, I
Mm-hmm.
am working in public realm. I'm designing experiences and I'm helping people navigate the physical environment.
Mm-hmm.
So in parallel to this, I am also working in poetic realm. And in poetic realm, I'm doing the same thing, that I'm actually helping listeners, readers navigate through the poetic realm. So it's basically, that's when people ask me that when you're working with poetry and you are working with design, how are they related? They are actually pretty much related in terms of what I am trying to do
Mm-hmm.
with these two things. So in design, I actually, one of the two artists, designers, thinkers who are like my key people who had a lot of influence on me. One is Bruno Munari, and other
Mm-hmm.
one is Kinya Hara. So Kinya Hara is like my most favorite designer. He's Japanese. I love his work. I love the whole idea of haptic experience, and you design things, you're solving problems, but you're also designing for memory. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's something which is really important, that when you're designing something, you have to engage and respond to all senses of the individual. And Bruno Munari, like, he has this really interesting book which is basically about like poetics of geometry and how everything in the world has actually come from these three shapes. So yeah, there's a lot of influence of Japanese design in my work and in my
Mm-hmm.
life as well. I follow a lot of these principles and process and methods which are coming from the Japanese design. And
Mm-hmm.
from, in terms of literature, like there are few poets actually, like, who had a really strong impact on me. One is basically like on top of the list is Mir Taqi Mir Ghalib, we all know. But in particular, there is Noon Mim Rashid as a poet. He was, again, uh, sometimes was also misunderstood, but I was still quoted here. He's considered to be a modernist poet, and he was someone who actually, like, I really liked his work. I really like his work because he was not rebelling against the tradition. He was trying to respond to a tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and that requires you to learn all the canons and overcome them, and to actually like find your own way of doing things. So I really like his work, and I really admire, and I closely study his work to
Mm-hmm.
understand that how he took the tradition and what
Mm-hmm.
he learned from the tradition, how he allowed that tradition to go through him, and also come up with his own way, respecting the tradition, so that even when he started responding to the tradition, people who hold the tradition to their heart, they were not offended by it. They understood what this guy was doing for working with tradition. Same goes for
Mm-hmm.
Nusrat Khan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I admire these people who actually rose above the tradition, and they managed to, like, bring us this whole new world of ideas and expressions.
Mm-hmm.
um so these are, like, yeah, a few people who had a lot of influence on me. And then there's this whole mystical poetry, which is, again, something very close to my heart. There's a poet called Baba Zahin Shah Taji.
Mm-hmm.
um his work, I really admire his work. And yeah.
That's wonderful. So those are the higher, in the hierarchy of influences that they're sitting on the top, right? So when you're meeting someone new, when there's an ordinary individual that you're just meeting, what is the first thing that you notice, and how do you like seek influence or inspiration from a person you're meeting? So what is that like? So if, for instance, you go out in a cafe and you're meeting someone for the first time,
Yeah.
what is it that strikes you the most? What is it? Is it about the way they carry themselves? Is it the way they speak? Something that, because these things, they also inform your own reactions and your own creative
Yeah.
process. So please tell us about that.
So I think my first thing is like I am really excited. I get really excited when I meet passionate people. No
Uh-huh.
matter what passion is, it has nothing to do with people being in only in the creative field. Let's say even if I meet someone who's a banker, let's say, and loves banking and is completely invested and really, really like fascinated by the idea of how economy works and how the world is changing. And for me, that is the most valuable thing,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of like how conclusive they are or how and I think there are certain type of people who like to like kind of like go out of beyond their comfort zones. So I
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of like personality and people who are very curious about everything,
Mm-hmm.
and also passionate about something, and they're driven by passion, and their eyes are glowing bright with passion. And
Mm-hmm.
I have come across a lot of people because I actually take all the energy from them and channel it into my work.
Yeah. So tell me, it's for a creative person, it's never just something, when you define yourself as a designer, you define yourself as a banker or an entrepreneur. It doesn't just come overnight, right? It's a process, and you have earlier memories of doing something which connects to who you are right now. So what is your earliest memory of doing something creative in life? Do you remember either performing that sparked this energy within you? Do you have a memory that has solely been with you forever and you're like, yes, that was my calling, and I'm so glad to be continuing that?
Yes, I was in Karachi back in 2007, and I was doing theater. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that was like I was still doing theater when I was young, but those were like minor roles or something that I was doing for fun. But when I did theater for the first time for a large audience, and I saw that, like I can be silent while performing and the whole world will stop. I realized that, okay, it's very daunting. The first experience is when you go on the stage, you have like
Mm-hmm.
400 people looking at you in, let's say, an art council or at Alhambra. Like there are
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of people, and there are all kinds of people. Uh, your heart is like, racing, and there's so much adrenaline, and it's something so powerful that in few seconds you have to overcome that. And then you also realize that I'm performing, I know what I need to perform. And since you have that whole power on the stage, you can actually express and you make so many people feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so powerful that I actually felt that, like, and I from me, the day when I started, like I performed for the first time, I loved it because I was like, there's so much impact I'm create like there's so many people who are creating memory with my activity. And then I was like, okay, this is something that I need to
Pursue.
continue, yeah,
Yeah.
pursue. But then over the years, I also learned that when I am performing for, like, say, 200 people, I'm
Mm-hmm.
still very distant from them. And also, I'm very curious about learning. So I want to, if I'm trying to read someone poetry, I'm not trying to actually like modulate my voice and make them experience poetry. I actually want to learn from them as well. And I care about how they feel, how do they experience. So how someone experiences my work is something so important. So that's why it was very important for me to scale down, work with smaller settings and more intimate settings, where while I'm performing, I can see into people's eyes
Mm.
and get response. For me, that's the most satisfying thing, that when I perform and someone starts thinking and someone is moved by it, And there have been cases where I perform poetry, and people who are older than me, like in their 60s, they would come and they would give me a hug. They're like, we know this poem for like 30 years, but we never thought about it this way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very extremely rewarding when you actually have so much impact on someone.
Mm-hmm.
And people, like for example, 2 days ago I was performing Fez at Art Dubai, and I was performing it in Urdu, and there was this guy in front of me, and he's nodding, he's listening, he's like completely immersed. And after, right the moment I stepped down the stage, the guy came and he gave me a hug, and he's like, bro, I'm from Saudi Arabia. I heard Urdu growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it means, but I love, what you are, how you're expressing it. And I don't under, and I'm so confused because I'm listening to you, and I'm moved, even though I don't understand the language. So these things are very rewarding, and I think that's the performance. That's a power of performance art.
So, what are the emotions and responses do you hope to create to your audience with your work? Is it being expressive? Is it like just this beautiful encounter that you just mentioned, this reaction from this man giving you a hug? I think that is something that stays with you forever. I don't know if you slept that night or not. I mean, if that happened with me, I would just, it would be such an overwhelming and humbling experience that I would literally start questioning things, that
Yeah.
are tied around my existence, or things that I know, or the blessings that I've been bestowed upon, and just the factor of being grateful and the gratitude
Yeah.
quota, it just shifts, right? So what are those other emotions and responses do you hope to create through your work?
Honestly, I like when people go into this whole state of thinking and imagining, right? I think
Mm.
a lot of the times, because we're not trained to use imagination, when
Mm-hmm.
I actually like try to put these prompts out there, and I literally, completely surround someone with ideas that I'm trying to present to them, and they are there, and I try to make them accessible. And if they are, in the receiving end, if they're able to like use those prompts and able to use their imagination, it takes them, in many places. It
Mm.
it it kind of like it moves them. Sometimes a lot of people cannot express what they're experiencing, and that's not the point.
Mm.
So, and I think the idea is to go into this whole mode of discovery and be able to appreciate that. And like, so I, for example, I remember, I think it's a good example. 10 years ago, when I was in university, I was watching this piece by Tafail Niazi, great Punjabi folk singer. He was singing this Punjabi song, Maini Jana Khediyan De Naal. And
Mm.
while performing, he was acting like here, like a woman who was the protagonist of the story. And this
Mm-hmm.
guy who was with, he was like, that why it's so bizarre, like, why does he need to act like a woman, right? And so over 10 years I had so many debates about, from with this guy. And obviously there are a lot of things happening in the society. Things are changing, Aurat March, and like the whole feminism, that's also like, building up so many, bringing in so many streams of narratives that we engage with on day-to-day basis. So that guy, over 10 years, like, I recently met him, and he's like, I can't believe it, like, how, my life changed, and I kept on thinking about something, and my whole mind shifted over, like, 10 years. And now
Mm.
I am, takes my daughters to like Aurat March, or to protest. But that, all of that happened through dialogue, and through complicated conversations where we are not arguing to prove
Comfortable.
our,
Mm.
yeah. And may having trying to have that uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
So uh, so I like that whole idea, I like the idea to make people feel uncomfortable, and I think, and so that they actually can think about, they can imagine other, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I remember I heard Shima Kirmani ji for the first time, she was talking about dance, and she was actually saying something very interesting, that we don't govern our bodies. And
Mm.
the thing is, the body's governed by society. So, and before that, every time I used to see a guy dance, like being raised up in a very patriarchal and what would be the right term, like a society which actually looks down on certain things and effeminate ways of expressing. I used to think that dance may be something that's like, I don't know why it exists. And I was young, I was unable to I was brainwashed or conditioned to think of it as something which is like not cool, not right. And I was unable to appreciate it as an art form. So when she said that, do you think you control your bodies? No, it's the world which is actually controlling your bodies.
Yes.
And for me, it struck me. I was like, that's true. Like the thing is, if I'm not gonna, move my hips to dance, who is controlling me? Like who decides that if I should do that or if I should not do that?
Yes.
And that was for me was very moving. And I try to bring things that I've learned from my complicated experiences and my unlearnings. I try to bring those unlearnings, through these projects to people.
That's wonderful. And so tell me, you've told us about the areas where you have mastered your technique, areas where you've excelled, things that you hope for yourself and from the society or your audience. Please tell us about the areas of your creative process where you lack and you're still working on improving them, and where you feel challenges and areas where you feel the energy is not that strong.
Energy is not that strong. I think I lack a little bit of discipline to put my
Uh-huh.
work out there. There are a lot of work that actually needs to be pushed across the line, but
Mm-hmm.
also like, I overthink those works, right?
Mm.
And I also think it's a painful thing because nowadays, like when we look at everything is released on the internet. So in a
Mhm.
way, if you don't, like I try to resist that whole idea that I would not let internet dictate that how my work needs to go out. Like if you look at my writings, none of my writings are online. I only perform my writings in private gatherings for a smaller audience because that has a very different purpose.
Mhm.
And so I like that the whole I don't like to be governed by the internet, but I also need to like catch up. And I feel like I've come up with ways where I can actually use internet slightly better.
Mhm.
I struggle with like managing time because I'm trying to do too many things. So in future, that's something that I've been told again and again and again and again by so many fellow creatives that I need to streamline, let go certain things. I cannot keep on like, certain skills and certain habits that I've actually kind of left behind. But I think I need to be able to streamline a bit more so that I can be more productive with my output. And
Mhm.
also, I think I've taken a lot of burden of like making creatives for holding creatives accountable for their lack of academic rigor. And
Mhm.
it's that I think now I feel like with my project I've archived so much stuff that people use on day-to-day basis. I feel like it's something that I need to stop looking at producing and creating and recreating materials uh, to give access to people. I think otherwise I will not be able to put my own work out there. I
Mhm.
want to work on a book. I have worked on my essays and small performances,
Mhm.
um, which gets completely compromised,
Mm.
and that's something that I need to. So yeah, I have to figure out things that I have to let go and focus on selfish mode of creativity.
Mhm. Have you ever experienced plagiarism or people copying your work or your style or your motive or the structure of your work? Have you ever experienced that in your life? Because as creative people, that's I think one of the biggest nightmares. When you see someone coming up with exactly the same thing or the idea that you just have shared and they've materialized it. So
Mhm.
have you experienced that in your throughout your creative process, and how do you deal with such things?
So I really believe when you actually are so invested in something and you
Mm-hmm.
do something so complex and complicated, it becomes more and more difficult for people to replicate. People can steal, but it can never be theirs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have experienced it. People would take my audios and they would put on their videos, because it's so, like, people use internet very casually. The other like not other day, like few months ago, actually, someone made me listen to this TikTok. Someone was acting to like a voice, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, wow, this voice sounds so familiar. And I'm like, this is my voice. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not on TikTok. Um, but at the same time, what I do as a project, there are certain people who actually like, some people are like, they reached out to me and they're like, we want to do something like you. And I was like, listen, I'll be more than happy to teach you and educate you with, the kind of work that I'm trying to do with, let's say, with Zair Zabar Pesh,
Mm-hmm.
because I really wanted to grow. I really want other people to do and take similar responsibility so I don't have to do it. So I try to actually, I even have documents which I actually share with people who like to do something similar. So they
Mm-hmm.
are I become friends with these people and I encourage them. I teach them on the side. I tell them, like, you need templates, I'll give you my templates. Just go out, scale. But at the same time, the work that is completely my personal work, that's something that I'm scared of, because that's what happened with me a couple of years ago, that someone took my work from internet and to actually share it with a client, in the advertising industry, and
Mm-hmm.
then someone just, like, s- stole my work. And
Mm-hmm.
then there have been cases where actually, like, someone took my work, and because of their ignorance or arrogance, they actually took creative liberty on my work and they completely destroyed it. And so that's why I also, like, kind of, and over the years I've disassociated myself with a lot of people like that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's also very dangerous. And
Mm-hmm.
because I've been a victim of that, and how someone can actually take your. So that's why when you're collaborating with someone, you have to make sure that the other person is going to use your work and in a responsible manner and not cause you damage, because I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced that in past, and it's painful. It's
Yes,
painful.
it is. So, as a creative individual, we often have this habit of filtering ideas and filtering people in our lives, right? We also catch up on energies of toxicity or positivity, someone being pessimist about something. And it also depends on the state or the phase of mind or the atmosphere that we are living in, right? Do you also filter people out or filter conversations out from your life, or do you escape from such situations, or do you have the strength to be there, absorb,
Have
and
to.
not let it affect you and then move on? What is your process?
So, absolutely. I have actually, like, let go, and I've filtered people in my life who
Mm-hmm.
I felt like they affected my mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also learn about relationships the hard way. And again, something that I also learn in therapy as well, that
Mm-hmm.
how important it is to actually stay away from unhealthy relationships. And even if you are in an unhealthy relationship, how you can actually see and give it chances and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you are in not in if you are in unhealthy relationships, then again it affects your life a lot. And as a creative, I think it's also important for people around you to be able to appreciate and understand that how creative people are like, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think every person has a very different kind of, like, expectations. But again,
Yes.
when you go through this whole, like, creativity, it's most of the time it's not tangible, so it's very difficult. It's also a painful process. It's an emotional process. And if you don't have right people around you, it can actually really affect how you operate on day-to-day basis,
Yes.
because
Yes.
creative people need solitude. Creative people need certain kind of, like, interaction of certain
Mm-hmm.
nature. But that
Mm-hmm.
solitude is so important for creativity. And if someone who's unable to appreciate that or work around it, it's always a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, creativity, like, I think, yeah, so I think it's important. And so it's not like all of my friends are from creative backgrounds. Most of them are not, but there are people who actually understand that, oh, we know him as a person, we understand him. And they also know that, oh, like someone like me can get really emotional about things and can be a bit aggressive at sometimes that I'm working on. But they understand, and I think those relationships and those are to be valued,
Yes.
and are people to keep.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I've been blessed with so many friends, amazing friends, people, so many people who I know they love me for who I am. So that keeps me sane regardless of the crazy things that I do in day-to-day basis in
That's
terms of my.
wonderful. How do you see your work evolving in the future, and where do you, what are the themes that you hope to explore and add into your creative work?
Honestly, that's a very difficult question, but what I know is like more, we have to see the bigger, wider context.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for example, Global South is something which is like picking up and has become a lot relevant. And we have to, something that I've actually come to terms with over last 10 years, because I work with so many different types of groups. I interact with people from fine arts, but at the same time I interact with people who are into more like consumer art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have kind of like learned to understand that there's an ecosystem. We
Mm-hmm.
have to contribute in that system. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this whole South Asian
Domain
global
that needs to
South,
be. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that to be worked. And so I think that is the future, the recent future, and we need to work on the global stage and try to come up with more universal ideas.
That's wonderful. On that note, I'd like to ask the last very important question. Is if I
Yeah.
ask you to give three positive affirmations to yourself, what would they be? Faraz
So,
Ali giving positive affirmations to Faraz Ali.
hmm, uh,
Yes.
it's no work is complete until you're alive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
until you're dead, basically, all work is work in progress. And that is number one. Number two, it's all right. There is every idea finds its own forms to resolve
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Every idea comes with a form, and there is someone out there who will take responsibility of that for us. And I think the last is make sure and be try to balance life.
Mm.
Not everything is important in that moment. There are other things. If everything you have to maintain and manage all aspects of life, or everything falls apart.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
This has been so wonderful. We got to see who this creative individual is, this genius who spreads out magic through his literature, through his performances, through his. I've had the opportunity to see you and witness your performance at Alhambra a few years ago, and also got a chance to talk to you at Art Dubai in Dubai a couple of years ago again. And I really wish to have you again here in Pakistan, and so we could have more meaningful conversations. And that I wish and I pray that you keep spreading this positive energy. May your service and your responsibility be strengthened over time, and may your mental health and emotional health, it stays balanced out with your creative health.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. That means a lot.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for inviting.
Thank you for supporting this. Thank you for generously accepting to be a part of this venture. It will stay with us forever, and whoever is going to watch this and listen to this is going to learn so much. Thank you so much for sharing your creative process, who you are, all the interesting things that you just shared with us. It really means a lot.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Happy to be part
Have
of
a
this.
great time with your great work, and we cannot wait to see more amazing projects. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And to everyone who has joined us, has listened to us, thank you so much for taking out time from your busy lives and schedules and being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that.
Hafiz.